All right, we got something a little bit different today after a couple days of recruiting talk. Or really, not just a couple days. Monday and Tuesday, a lot of recruiting talk. We even talked about it, recruiting a lot last week, Wednesday and Thursday, leading into the official visits. We'll have more recruiting talk, of course, tomorrow. But wanted to change it up just a little bit today because we actually got a chance to do a little interview, have a little conversation. Sometimes we put these on Fridays, but we'll have our mailbag episode on Friday and don't want to change up the schedule too much. We'll have the official visit preview tomorrow. We'll have the mailbag on Friday. And today we got a special guest for you. And our guest is Mike Stacchiotti. He's the strength and conditioning coach for Pitt football. He's been in that job. Why wouldn't I have this information readily available to you? Or readily available for me to read to you. I forgot which year he joined Pitt. 2020 was his first year. So this is going to be his fifth season. He was also at Mississippi State. He was at Cincinnati, Colorado State, Mississippi State. Prior to that, he was an intern at Mississippi State in 2015, returned as the assistant strength and conditioning coach in 2018. 2019, he was with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and then he was hired in 2020 to work at Pitt, and he's been in that job since then. Youngstown guy, went to Baldwin Wallace, graduated in 2014, so a little bit of a younger guy, but I think he's done a pretty good job, and he's a pretty impressive guy. And look, you talk to enough strength coaches, I mean, they're all no nonsense. They're all, a lot of them are usually hoarse. They usually, because they've usually been screaming about something. And, I think they're very much, very matter of fact, very blunt, very, they're not going to play around, is generally what you'll find with strength coaches. They don't really play around, whether it's dealing with the players, or interviews when they are forced to do them. And I don't want to say forced. We had been asking for a chance to talk to Mike Stacchiotti for a little bit. And obviously he had to agree to that. If he wasn't interested in doing it, he would have said no, and we wouldn't have gotten the interview. But Mike was nice, kind enough to take some of his time this week and talk with us. And the reason I had wanted to talk to Mike Stack, I think strength coaches are always interesting to talk to, and there's a lot of topics that we're going to cover here with Mike. One of the reasons I wanted to talk to him, though, one of the, particular why I made a request to speak with him, is the adjustment to the new offense. As we talk about Kade Bell's offense, we talk about the tempo offense, we talk about snapping the ball every 12 seconds and all this stuff. One of the things I thought about was like, look, there has to be a strength and conditioning component to this. And Kade Bell's offense, Kade Bell bringing in this offense to Pitt inevitably had to change what Mike Stacchiotti and the strength and conditioning team did with the players and how they approached them. And so I was curious about that process of learning the new offense, not just learning the new offense, but learning what the new offense required and how they kind of put that into action since Kade Bell was hired in December. And it's funny, you'll hear, right off the bat, I asked Mike Stacchiotti about this in our conversation here. And he kind of did, him and his staff kind of did what you and I did. And we just started going and trying to find everything we could about Kade Bell's offense, of what it was and what it was going to look like and what it was going to mean. And obviously he has a lot more riding on it than we do, but he sort of went about that same sort of process and got some ideas, met Kade Bell, learned from Kade Bell what he wanted to do, and then actually got to see it in practice during spring camp. And I think that really adjusted the way Mike Stacchiotti has approached the offseason training program since then. And so I thought, I've thought for a while it would be interesting to hear about what that process was like, and I think it's true. I think it ended up being pretty interesting to hear it from Mike Stacchiotti. We talked about that a lot. We talked about what this new offense demands out of the players from a conditioning standpoint, and recovery and rest intervals and that kind of thing. And then we talked about a few other topics too. You might have heard about the big plank competition. That a few guys went over that 20-minute mark on holding in a plank. And hearing Mike Stacchiotti bring it up and his sort of perspective on that competition was pretty interesting, and I think says a lot about this team. So pretty good conversation overall. I enjoyed it. I think you'll enjoy it as well. So let's not delay any further. Pitt strength and conditioning coach Mike Stacchiotti joining us right here on the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And thanks for joining us. I'm really glad we could catch up like this. I've been curious about it. really ever since Kade Bell got hired. I've been curious, watching spring camp and all the talk we hear about tempo and everything like that. I've been curious how that changes things on your end and how that makes the work in the strength room and particularly the conditioning work a little different. But I want to take it back to the beginning, when you first see that Coach Narduzzi's hiring Kade Bell, you know, as the strength and conditioning coach, how closely are you watching that? Not just out of curiosity about the offense, but how close are you watching it and thinking like, all right, what does this do for my job? How am I going to have to change things? What was your sort of, what were your thoughts when you heard that hire and what you thought it meant for you?
Yeah, like me and my staff, we obviously tried to dig up anything we could. So, you look, trying to find things on YouTube about Western Carolina, and obviously, Kate came through. We talked a little bit, and his whole staff, just trying to get up to date. So, you're trying to figure out, you hear we're going to play fast and score faster, and you know, when you hear that at first, you're just kind of like, yeah, okay, whatever. And then you got to see it though. We made adjustments in the winter off of speculation and just borderline hearsay and stuff we gathered from just talking to the new staff. But then you don't really know it till you see it. And so spring, we're able to see everything. And then that's where sports science comes in, where we're able to reverse engineer practice and look at metrics like, guys' player load on catapult, the high speed distance, total distance, accelerations, decelerations, all these things. And from there, we could really take a good look and have objective measures of, all right, this is what they're doing and this is how we have to prepare for it.
Hmm. Have you ever, worked with the program running an offense like this before? Like, have you ever been around this kind of thing?
Not like this. Uh, Joe Moorhead at Mississippi State, he was a little more of a tempo
Sure.
offense. This is really quick. And the biggest thing is we always say when it comes to intensity, like density drives intensity. So there's a lot of plays getting ran in a
Mhm.
short amount of time. So that kind of tweaks with, how not necessarily how we condition, but just the methods. Principles stay the same. The methods have to be adjusted.
Is there, I think, we call it like strength and conditioning coach. I don't know if you think of those two things as separate elements. You probably think of things as like 30 different elements, really. But was there much that needed to change on the strength side? Or could you kind of keep your focus where you would typically keep it? I'm sure you're always evolving there, but was this more like an adjustment that needed to be made on the conditioning side of things?
Really, it's all kind of what anything we do on the field is going to dictate what we do in the weight room. They have to, it's a yin and yang. And
Hmm.
that's from, energy system standpoint, that's from just the general uh development of the muscle tendonous relationship. So you have to play that yin and yang. So there is anything we change on the field is going to dictate what we change in the weight room as well. But I mean, overall, um, it changed from like a standpoint of like rest intervals. We have to get guys acclimated to that tempo, but at the same time, we do have an understanding that the best way to condition for football is to play football, and there's nothing we're going to do that's going to completely replicate everything on the field. It's a lot of specificity. You can't recreate a neuromuscular action without doing that exact action. So we made some adjustments to rest intervals. We went back to kind of added another day of running, which is more of a, if we think about energy systems, it's an alactic aerobic development day. So it's not very intensive, but get the guys winded a little bit so we get some, bigger gas tank for practice purposes and recovery purposes. But outside of that, our principles stay the same. The methods got adjusted a little bit, but overall, every year our program changes. So even before coordinators change or anything, you have to adjust to personnel. You have to adjust to, the culture of the team. So our program in 2020 was different than 21, and 21 was different than 22 and 23 and 24. So we just have to look and see what we need to establish on the team from a standpoint of our key performance indicators, see what's worked in the past with specific methods that are backed by principle, and then from there make those small adjustments.
I'm sure you dive into that stuff and making those plans of what the next year's goals are going to be, probably as soon as the season ends, right? I can't imagine you waste much time. Did it, you know, are a lot of those things still sort of, what you were thinking on December 1st or December 2nd, or are you still, or have a lot of those had to change because of the change in the offense?
Um, Kind of both, a lot of the stuff we saw that we want to establish, it kind of naturally worked itself out. And then other things, it's give or take. It's very fluid. Day to day, things get adjusted. So from a workout standpoint, our workouts are adjusting, and things you see that are happening within the team. Where are they at regarding like building and developing a brotherhood? Where are they at developing, pride in the university? Where are they at and how they conduct themselves and upholding the standard? Those are very fluid as well. So you're constantly making adjustments to get what you need out of it. It never goes in a straight line, it never goes according to plan. It's always, you know, veering off. You got to make sure it's staying on track and getting to the final destination.
Yeah, I think one of the more interesting things and something I've kind of wondered about, and you mentioned about rest intervals, recovery. Obviously, guys got to be able to recover quicker, right? I mean, they've got to be able to, because you don't have that time to stand there, the extra 10 seconds or whatever. Uh, that applies to everybody in the offense. Is it toughest on the offensive linemen because they're the biggest guys? Like, are they the ones that have needed to develop that the most, or is it pretty broad across everybody on offense?
I'd say it's pretty broad. I think the linemen obviously have to have that motor, but at the same time you have to break it down. They can't be doing the same thing as all the other positions. And we always train specific to position somewhat. So offensive lineman, defensive lineman, their conditioning and their lifting is dictated because the positions are so unique in
Mm-hmm.
football. They might as well be their own sport. So we're always kind of tailoring it towards those main groups. So we do have to make the adjustments, and I think it was a hard adjustment for them to get used to that tempo. But I think everybody had a little bit of an adjustment period, and I can't say one adjusted quicker than the other,
Mm-hmm.
really.
What how do you approach, say, so on a play, a receiver runs a 40-yard go route, and he's sprinting for 40 yards, right? As opposed to the lineman on that same play is just pushing against the guy, and he doesn't move much more than 3 or 4 yards, but he's still exerting, but it's a different type of exertion. So
Yeah,
how do you train those two different types of exert? Because those seem like the most extreme. I mean, a quarterback's dropping back, maybe he scrambles a little bit. Running back kind of does a little bit of a blend of both, but those are two extremes, right? Like
yeah.
fly down the field as fast as you possibly can, push against the guy as hard as you possibly can. They're not the same sort of conditioning, right? Or
Yeah.
are they? Or is there overlap there?
So what we do is we try to, mimic the action as much as possible. So obviously we have the sleds that we load up with weight, and then we'll do a circuit with the linemen, specifically the offensive line and the defensive line. So part of their conditioning will be, a prowler drive, and you try to simulate drives. And especially regarding the high speed distance, the offensive line won't get as much nowhere close to high speed distance as even a mid or a skill player. So we take that into account. Though they run, we'll do things such as bikes,
Hmm.
um, with a circuit with the prowlers, just to get that stimulus of driving into something and having that external resistance to go against, because it is completely different. We could run a tempo run twice, three times, four times a week with the guys, and as soon as they go to block somebody, they're going to be gassed. And even when we go out and go against somebody and they actually are allowed to hit and block, it's still a different stimulus. They're going to have to adapt to it. Our job is to get it to a point where when they get to that first day of camp and they're hitting somebody, that it's not completely tanking them.
Was it like the first live day in spring, whenever that first time was that they went for a live period? Did that give you like 1,000 data points of information to work with? You know what I mean? Like finally seeing it actually happen. Like even if they only ran, 3 series or whatever they did that, how big was that for you as far as like getting a sense of, okay, all right, I see what we need to work with here?
Yeah, like the first day I remember, I was like, "Oh, this is quick," but we did a good job. And then like a couple of days later, it starts actually rolling because they're getting their installs in. And then I went, "Oh man, I would have done this different, that different." But you can't anticipate it, right?
Right.
It's hard to see, and then you start looking at the data points, and over time you get more and more and more. So spring was vital for us because we had to know what to do, and we made the necessary adjustments, and we're continuing to adjust.
So I mean, as we talk about like the rest and reels, the recovery, the things you're doing with the guys, are the defensive guys doing everything the offensive guys are doing in that? Are you trying to build that up too? I mean, or are you just focused on the offense there?
No, that I mean it's both sides because the defense is gonna have to see it on the other side. So especially in camp, those first parts of camp, it's offense versus defense, and we're rolling. We don't get into the rocks until later in camp. So
Right.
they have to be able to go against that. And then from there they'll make their own individualized adjustments. But if we're going like this, they're gonna lay a great foundation. And that's what we have to do is lay the foundation, make sure they maintain it over time. But yeah, they're based off of them going against our offense. So it's a lot of
Right.
the same stuff.
I guess there's no downside, right, to conditioning them that way. I mean, then if they run into an offense like you guys had last year, it's taken 25 seconds between snaps. Oh well, they just get a little extra recovery, right? Like, would there be a downside of training them to play like this, and then they go and face a slower offense, or is there no downside to that?
No, I don't think there's a downside. I think the only thing that we have to be cognizant of is, it has to ride a wave, right? And
Mhm.
so everything we do, there has to be peaks and valleys. And our valleys have to be as deep as our peaks are high. So we have to make sure that we're undulating intensities. Like within our workouts, it's easy to undulate intensity because we have percentages, we have VBT, we map out the velocities, we map out the distances and the runs, all of that. Rest interval. There's so many variables just in the game of football that are out of your control. You have to do our best, and that's what's great about Coach Dews is he listens and we undulate practice intensities. So if we just are running hot, that's where we're going to run into trouble because you can't
Mhm.
just they're not robots, right?
Right.
But no, we're going to be conditioned, so I'm excited to see that.
I know you guys, and you kind of mentioned you guys measure the velocity, you measure the GPS of how many miles everybody runs throughout practice and that kind of thing. Like, how much are you looking at like heart rate data? Is that a big part of it too? Like, where are guys fluctuating? Or they, you know what I mean? And what have you been able to take from that data from what you saw this spring?
We use heart rate on the linemen particularly. Our vest, we have the straps and they ride down on them, so the heart rate variability is kind of chaotic on it. So we don't rely too much on that just because
Okay.
we don't, for us, bad data is, worse than no data.
Right.
So I don't weigh too heavy on that just because of the how it could be inaccurate. So once we get kind of a way that the strap doesn't slide down or vest doesn't malfunction if you wash it, we're gonna be rolling through that. And we looked at a ton of research regarding that, but a lot of it's the external objective data. And then when we go to more of a subjective area, it's wellness questionnaires that we found to be very vital. We have force plates to track neuromuscular, firing and readiness and all this stuff. The best thing to do is ask a guy like, "How you feeling today?" Really is like
Yeah.
nothing goes beyond better than, "Hey, coach, I feel great," or "Coach, I feel like crap." You don't need to get too into the weeds with the science to know when guys are feeling good and when guys are feeling like crap.
Right. Well, like you said, bad data is the worst thing you can have. How much do you have to trust those guys to be honest with you and not just have like somebody who just constantly tells you he's doing fine, even though he's, might be falling apart inside. You have to
Yeah,
trust, like you have to stress that to him, right?
that's huge, and that comes with the relationships. We have a ton of guys come in, and they look drained. Like, "Hey man, like you doing all right? Yeah, I'm great, coach." And that's where you get the objective data through. Yeah, your velocities look down. Yeah, you're sluggish, and this is showing me that you're sluggish, and you find out like, yeah, I didn't sleep worth crap last night, or I'm starting to get sick, or ate something weird. But that comes with the relationships you build. You could tell who's doing good and who's not
Yeah.
nine
I
times out of 10 before you ask.
mhm. I mean, I definitely remember what my sleep patterns were like in college. How much do you stress that to these guys of like how much you need to sleep, when you need to sleep, and how important that is, how much because I slept like 4 hours a night in college or so.
Yeah.
I just didn't care. I mean, I wasn't trying to be a D1 football player, but I mean, how much do you stress that with these guys?
No, like a lot. And we talked about, was it Matt Frazier, I believe, was a CrossFit, uh, like CrossFit champion, right? And he was brought up through Olympic training centers for weightlifting. He's on a podcast or something. He said if people knew how like effective sleep was, it'd be a banned substance. And, you say something like that, the guys are like, "Oh."
Yeah,
But our guys, the older guys are in tune. Majority of the older guys are pretty in tune because you go through those growing pains of like, this first time being independent and having my own schedule and somebody ain't telling me when to go to sleep and things like that. And then they come in and, you know, get folded by a lift or something, and they learn over, failure or whatever it may be. But it's a process. We talk constantly, myself, our dietitian Cena, my staff, we're always talking to guys about their sleep and how to get better quality sleep, things of that nature. And you guys have the whoops that we monitor. So
Mm. Right. Nice. I I'm curious. I mean, I feel like in your line of work, they often talk about, there's obviously lots of tangible gains, but there's also that sort of intangible. And you talked about it a little bit, culture and sort of guys lifting each other up and working together. And I mean, a little bit of building character, right? And so, are there those things you have the guys do that they might have a tangible impact on strength or conditioning, but they're maybe more about building character? And do the guys pick up on that? Do they kind of know, like, all right, he just wants to see what we're made of today. Like, this isn't about like, can we improve my squat or something? He
yeah,
just wants to see what we can do.
100%. Like everything has to be backed by a principle,
Mm,
right? Or else you're just, throwing crap at the wall, seeing what sticks. But there's times where you're just kind of you have to push beyond. It's a gladiator sport, right? It's too many strength coaches nowadays try to optimize in an optimal sport,
mm.
right? You're playing a sport where you're sprinting as fast as you can and throwing your body, trying to wreck some dudes. Got myself almost swore there. So trying to wreck some dude, right? And uh, you're going to talk about, oh, how do you feel on a, perceived exertion? Was that too hard? Was it, sometimes you have to push, and a lot of development, I think, as a man, as a football player, is going through tough things and pushing yourself. Like we did a plank competition. I know Coach talked about this. I don't like talking about it too much. We did plank competition, right? For the last 5 seasons, I always do this, and I do this as an example. Like you do a front plank. This is how I want you to do a front plank. Everybody's in a straight line. We have no music playing, or I'll play Sweet Caroline or something, right? And all I tell them is there's one rule. This is how we want you to hold a plank, and this is what it's supposed to look like. And we're to coach you up, but the one rule is don't touch the ground. And every year, you get minute in, 2 minute in, somebody goes down. And as soon as one person goes down, it's okay because it's contagious. Everybody else just starts dropping because I'm not the first one, or I
Right.
drop because I'm, a big guy and I'm not going to win anyway. But this year, like these guys held plank we hit the 20-minute mark and I blew the whistle because I was like, oh, the point's made.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. And then guys refused to go down and like yelling at me, like, no, we ain't going down. So I got 45-pound plates, started putting them on them, trying to get them to go down. And I mean, we had 9 guys that were over 20 minutes. And it was ridiculous. And it's just a testament of what these guys want in the culture of this team. They want to win. They're hungry. They're pissed about last year. They're working, you know, correlation don't mean causation, but I love seeing that, and that's the first time in 5 years. That's exactly what I wanted. I wanted somebody that refused to quit, guys that competed. I mean, Terrence Moore won it. He didn't use the excuse of like, I'm over 300 pounds. I tried to put a plate on him. He didn't know everybody else getting the plate on. He's trying to like throw me off of him. Like, yeah, I mean, it was great. It was the best, one of the coolest things. There's those moments that you get in the weight room that are like legendary to
Hmm.
you. Like, and it's not always like the coolest thing ever. Like it was a plank competition. There's nothing cool or sexy about that. But that's something I'll remember forever. That was awesome.
And that's, I mean, like you said, you've never had guys go that long, right? I mean, like, do you? And again, like you said, correlation, causation, and all that. But I mean, there's got to be a part of you that thinks like they were driven at least a little bit, right, by going 3-9. Like, I mean, maybe do you see that in other? I guess that'll be the question. Do you see that in other things you do that the guys are maybe just pushing a little bit more, maybe than they did a year ago?
They're pushing more, and there's just more accountability. There's more. I don't know how to even put it. I mean, we had 90 some guys on Saturday out on the field doing a player ran walkthrough.
Hmm.
Like
Wow.
I'm in here waiting for guys to come get recovery work, and like everybody's outside doing a player led walkthrough. Like walkthroughs are difficult to, as even with coaches, just because it's hard to keep focus.
Mm-hmm.
He had 90 players plus, just all out there, voluntary, walking through on their own. It was like that's the stuff that like little things like that go a long way, and you see kind of a maturity out of some of the younger guys that you remember as just young guys, and they're kind of slaps. Now they're grown up and taking ownership, and there's still room to grow. Again, is it ever going to be perfect? Probably not. And if it is, like I probably need to get my eyes fixed. But
Good. Yeah.
it's going good.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's ever gonna, like I said, I don't think there's ever be a strength coach that goes, oh yeah, we sucked this off season. Like guys didn't work hard. They always work hard.
Right.
They're always getting bigger and faster and stronger. Everybody across the country is doing that. But the thing is, like, how are they buying into each other? How are they conducting themselves in their lives outside of this? How serious are they about their craft? You know, that's the stuff that separates teams, and I like what I'm seeing so far.
Thanks to Mike Stacchiotti for joining us for this morning pit, having this little conversation. It was enjoyable to do. Those last few questions, I didn't want to be a total goober about it. Like, oh, do you see the guys having a different perspective? But look, when Terrence Moore is pushing through for 20 plus minutes, getting weight added in minute 21 or whatever it was, and still holding up in that plank, something that he has not done before, something that guys have not done before, something that the players have not pushed through for, in the past, I can't help but say maybe there's a connection. I can't help but think maybe there's just a little element of this team, or maybe a big element of this team that's straight up pissed off about going 3-9 last year. And they're bringing it to what they do in the offseason. Now, I mean, ultimately that doesn't matter if they're not good enough. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter if the coaching's not good enough. It doesn't matter if the players aren't good enough. We'll find out about that during the season. But at least that drive, that Stacchiotti's talking about, that he has seen, I think it's pretty interesting. And particularly if it stands up as a contrast. I don't know if that, the contrast is necessarily why they went 3-9, and I don't know if it'll necessarily be why they win more than that this year. But it's interesting perspective. It's interesting off-season perspective. Everybody's a champion in the off-season, but it's interesting to get some of those perspectives from inside the strength room. I think Mike is a really interesting guy. Like I said, we could have talked for a long time. I think we could have talked for a long time about a lot of topics, but we decided to hold it just to 20 minutes or so there, just to keep within our usual time frames. But listen, thanks for tuning in. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Get all of our Pitt video content, morning Pitt videos, interviews like this, our weekly live stream like we're doing tonight at 6 p.m. And, anything else that might pop up, practice highlights, press conferences, things like that. We have it all right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So make sure you like this video and subscribe, and check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com for all the Pitt sports info you can possibly handle. All right, full blow back to recruiting tomorrow. And we'll have lots of coverage to get you ready for the official visit weekend. And the recruits coming in to visit Pitt. Should be another big one. Should land more commitments. Should be rinse and repeat from last week. And that's fine because these weekends are fun. So thanks for tuning in today. Hope you had a great, whatever it was, Tuesday. And your week is going well. Hope you enjoy Wednesday. And we'll catch up with you tomorrow. We'll talk to you tonight for the live stream. We'll catch up with you tomorrow for the morning pit right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.